All right. Okay. So let's get started. And I just want to show you what we'll be building today. Let me, oh wait. So I think I have it running. Let me find it. Okay, so this is what we'll be building today. We'll try to build all of these. I don't know if we can get this far. It is a little complicated to get this far, but we'll see. We already looked at the Open Weather Map API. We looked at Postman yesterday. So all we have to do today is build the app, write the code, get the info, and post the info, right? So what displays here is just an icon depending on the weather, and then the day. So today was Tuesday, and then the high and low temperature. And it's not a full app, it's not fully baked, right? And the point is of these workshops is to give you a real strong base, so then you can build on top of this app, and you can build features on top of this app. We're just focusing on the base today because building a project end to end, that's your responsibility. We can just get you started, right? And it's not fun if everyone has the same project at the end and it's all you can't do anything to make it your own, right? Okay, so let's get started. Yeah, give me a sec. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is, let me quit that. The first thing we want to do is open up Xcode, and we'll click New Xcode Project. And I don't know if you guys were here last time, but we believe these workshops are independent of one another. So I'll kind of explain I'll be kind of brief with the explanation of Xcode, but yeah. So what we have here is the options to create different templates. So right now we have a normal app, document app, game app. Right now we'll just focus on normal app. And just a good note is since they released Xcode 12, they changed this this used to be called single view app. So now if you look at any demo that's on YouTube now, it will say single view app. So that's one thing to note, that if you go online now, don't look for this app when you're creating a new project. Look for single view app, okay? And let's click it. And then now we have to put our project name. We'll call it weather. We'll call it RUMAD weather workshop. And then team, I believe you can put yourself if you're signed in. I think none is fine as well. I don't think you need a team. But if you want to download it onto your phone later after this workshop, you can figure out how to do that. You'll need a team. Organization identifier, it's basically how you'll be identified on the App Store, right? Every app has an organization behind it, and it's just a unique identifier. Right now, we don't really care. We can just do com.example because we're not shipping to the App Store, but if we were, it has to be unique. Bundle identifier also has to be unique. It's basically how your app identifies itself on the App Store. Interface, we have two options. SwiftUI is a newer option. Storyboard is the robust, it's been proven over time. So SwiftUI, we'll have the next workshop will be in SwiftUI, or maybe the one after that, I'll see. But it's basically Apple's new design interface to make apps. It's kind of you guys know what Bootstrap is for web development? It's basically, so what Bootstrap does, it doesn't give you control of placing items anymore. It does it itself. You just kind of tell it what to do, and it'll decide how to do it. Storyboard, we decide what to do and how to do it. It gives us more flexibility, and this is what they usually use in industry right now because it takes time for them to transition between the different design protocols. Because you'll see why, maybe if you come next time, you'll see why they're so different, and it's very difficult for companies to transition over. And then we have two options for languages. Objective-C is the language they used for iPhone apps from 2007 to 2014, and then since 2015 they've been using Swift, right? It's just a new modern language. what I compare it to like something that already exists right now that you might know of, is very similar to Java. Like Objective-C is also very similar to Java. Java is very similar to C. C is similar to C++. So it's in like that C-based environment. So strongly typed. It's not like JavaScript. Core data is persistence. So we're not doing anything with persistence this time. We're doing a network call. Hopefully towards the end of the year, we might have a workshop on maybe data persistence a little bit. And then tests, we're not really interested in that because that's just like ways to test our app. We don't have an app to test, and we're not going to test it robustly, so that doesn't matter. So RUMAD weather app, that's our app. We can create it anywhere on our desktop. I have this folder for iOS workshops, and I'll just put it in there. Okay. Right. So now what I want to do is I believe I can like expand this fully based. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that, but I'll try expand it like this so you guys can see most of it. There's a lot here. It's kind of intimidating. We kind of went over this in depth last time. So if you want to really look at exactly how we did everything and like the lay of the land, maybe look at the previous iOS workshop, and that's on YouTube. This time I want to keep it pretty light. I don't want to go over everything again. It just gets pretty complicated, but we'll get through things as we go through it. All right. So the first thing I want to do is look at this project structure area, right? And I want you guys to click on main.storyboard. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is create rows. Like right now, we just have a blank slate, right? And I want to create a row. And a good thing to note is right now the area seems a little cramped. Like there's like, I have this project area open. I have this this thing open. I'll talk about it later. And I also have this right panel open. To close the panels, you have these panels on the buttons on the right, and those can close the panels. Now you have a lot more space. Okay. So now what I want to look at first is this hierarchy. So basically anything that's on the screen will be shown here. So right now we have something called a view. A view is basically this is a screen, right? What I want to do first is I want to have like rows. I don't want this blank screen, right? And usually most apps, like you scroll on apps, you can't scroll a view. Like a view is just a screen. Are there like screens still used on apps? Yeah, usually for like queries, if you want to like, suppose you want to like enter your information, there'll be text fields and a button. That's when you'll see like a blank screen. But usually you see like Instagram, Twitter, Airbnb, like I'm trying to think of another contacts, right? Your contacts list. That's all. Those are all rows, and they just look really fancy. But they're all like, if you're able to scroll, that's a row, right? Every individual attribute is a row, and that's what I want to create here. And the way we do that first is we want to just delete this view, right? So not the view controller, not the saved area. Click on the view, and just click on it once. Just don't click on it, don't double click on it. Just click on it once and delete it. And now you should see view controller here. And what we're going to do is insert those rows. So you have to click on the plus sign up here, and then you'll get this UI library that shows up, and you can type in table view. They also have another thing called collection view. So the difference between table view and collection view is collection view allows you to like maybe make rows and columns, but table view only allows you to have rows. So I think a very good example I'll show you after have the Airbnb app, which is very nicely designed in my opinion. So something like a collection view would be like something that can like scroll sideways. Oh, you can't see that because it's a green screen. But like something that can scroll sideways, or something that has like a lot of like 2 rows and 2 columns. Like you'll see that on the App Store. You'll see a lot of collection views there. But most of the time, Instagram, Twitter, they just use table views. It's simple, just rows. So you just want to drag this in, hover over the view controller, and drop it, right? And what we did here, we kind of like just made it a UI element. There's also another thing. If you look down here, there's something called table view controller, which looks a little different. Don't drag this. I'm just dragging it out for example sake. It's basically the same thing, but this is only for a table view. So like a lot of times you'll have like different things. You'll have rows and rows on your app, but you'll have like things on the side that you can put there. But this is solely meant for the purpose of just being a table, right? So I'm not really interested in doing that. Like today we'll only have rows, but like most of the time we'll just use this approach. And that's what I've been using myself, right? You can explore with this, see what you can do, but this approach is better. This approach is more flexible. Okay, so I don't know if you saw, but there was like a cell there, and you might be thinking, how do you like have that cell? And another word for cell, row, is cell. So oftentimes you'll just hear me say cell, and when I say cell, I mean row, right? How do you get that row? So you click on this panel thing, the panel hider button, and then you click on your table view, and then you'll see a bunch of inspectors here. So these are what this panel is called is the inspectors panel. So you have the attributes inspector, which is this is the identity inspector. It's an ID card. And you have the attributes inspector. That's where we're at right now, which is the sliders. And then you have the side inspector, which we might see later on. Side inspector has to do with how do you lay out the items on the screen. So right now we're looking at the attributes inspector, and we want to increase the prototype cells to 1. So it just gives us a feel for how our cells look like. You can increase it to 2, 3, 4, 5. You can just see how it looks. That's how we should expect it to look. But I'm okay with just viewing 1. Okay, and that's pretty much it for our UI actually, right? You'll see we want some text, right? But there's something we'll look over later, which we can just input text without it even like adding a label or anything. If you click on the UI library, they're like labels, buttons, pictures. I think it's imagery down here, right? We can put those properties on top of the cell to customize it, but right now we're just focused on displaying information. We just want to display a small like string of information, and for every single row on like what the weather is. Then we can try and play around with how we can customize it, okay? So the first thing, now we have that settled, and now we're gonna start writing some code, right? So one thing to note before we jump into the code is if you click here on the view controller and you go to the attributes, the identity inspector, you see a class. So every view controller here, every screen is connected to one class. So this is connected to the view controller class. And this is the view controller class right here. So I want to just have you like get you in the practice of maybe like connecting a new class to a screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete this view controller class, right? This is class view controller. What we're going to do is we're going to right click on it, and then there should be a delete button here. And then you can just click remove reference. That will delete it. And now we are going to make a new view controller class. This might have popped up for you. Just like find the middle part and you can close it. Put it, drag it back into center. So now we want to create a new view controller class. And the way we can do that is click on this project folder, and you can hold Command N. Hold Command N. And you'll see like there's a bunch of options here. So there's a Cocoa Touch class and there's a Swift file. I don't know if you remembered the view controller class that we just deleted was a .swift file. But here's the curveball. We'll be making the new view controller class of type Cocoa Touch class. So the heuristic here is if you can touch it, then if this class if this class is gonna be connected to something that you can touch, then you want to use Cocoa Touch. If you just want to store data and logic, you would use Swift file. And there's another thing down here, Swift UI view. That's for Swift UI, so don't consider that. So this is for data and logic, Swift file, and the Cocoa Touch is for anything you can touch. So now it's going to ask us like, okay, what type of class do you want this Swift file to be? So we want it to be of type view controller, which is the one we just deleted. So we can scroll here and like look for it, but we can just type. We know what we want. It's called UI view controller, and click on that. And then we're going to call this weather view controller. And that should be it. I'm just looking at the comments to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, yeah. So call this weather view controller, press next, and it kind of knows where you want to make it, so just press create. Okay, so we have something that looks very similar. If you guys took note of what it looked like last time, it looks exactly the same. And I just want to note with the new Xcode 12, you actually have these tabs up here, and you can switch back and forth between frequent tabs. So let's go back to the main.storyboard. And we want to click on this view controller, and we want to connect it to the right class, which is weather view controller. Right? If we try to click the old view controller, which we deleted, nothing pops up. It doesn't autofill because we removed reference to it. So now weather view controller, now it's connected. And now we're pretty good. Okay, so now I'm just gonna take a 2-minute break to answer some questions. So a couple of you are asking like, you were having trouble with the API or you weren't here yesterday. For today, don't worry about the API. I have the API key and we'll be using that. But we'll look at the API a little today, so you'll get an idea of what the API is. But there's nothing on your end you have to do to access the API because we'll be using my API key today. Okay. Yeah. Will I be able to post yesterday's video? I'll see. Like yesterday was supposed to be an informal video that we usually don't record and post, but I'll see if it's worth it to post. And I don't know like if it would help you, but we'll see. I'll think about it. But we'll definitely be posting this on YouTube. Okay. How do you get rid of the table view controller if you dragged it? Right. So in case you dragged it, so what you want to do is suppose you dragged it out, right? So you can just click on the table view controller here and press delete. So table view controller scene, you can press delete, or you can click on this top bar here and press delete. See, that should delete it. Yeah. Or you can just click on this and delete it as well. Okay. Okay, now let's jump into the code and start writing some stuff. So we create this new weather view controller, and we'll pull this up here. And what we want to do, what's our first objective is to fill the table view with something, right? I want you guys to get a feel for how it looks like, right? And that's what we're going to try and do first. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to declare an array in Swift. And the way we do that is we'll display a, let's say it's going to be a static array that we're never going to change. So we're going to say let array, well, let's make a good name, a better name. Days of type string is equal to, and then I'll put the days of the week starting from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Yeah, it's gonna take some time, but So this is a good time to ask a question if you're a little confused on anything. Saturday. Did I skip a day? I think I skipped a day. No, I didn't. Okay, so just note there's no semicolon, and this is the way we would declare an array. So how you would declare a normal string would be like let str of type string, and if you want to declare something as an array, you would just put brackets around it to indicate it's an array. Okay. So now I want to display this information in the rows that we have in our table, right? So maybe we can press run here. Before we press run, we want to change it to iPhone 11 because that should be the one you guys are using as well. So here I have an iPhone 11. Do they have iPhone 12 here? They just came out. No, they don't. But we're going to be using an iPhone 11. So this, we can specify what type of simulator that we want. So we can press run, and this will launch the simulator. So from our guest, nothing should be populated. We should just have a blank table view. Okay. Right. Okay, so now we see a bunch of rows. In these rows, I want to put in like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? Okay, I'll put that to the side. And the first thing we want to do that is we'll have to connect this view controller with the view controller that we have here. I mean, the table view we have here. And the way we do that is we have to click on this tab sign. And now it's a little cramped, but what we're going to do is we have two panels here now, if you click the plus sign. And maybe we have an option here to go to the weather view controller, or if you don't have this tab up here, you can hold Option Shift, click on one of these files. The file we're interested in is weather view controller, and then while holding Option Shift, you click what tab that you want. Okay. So just to create some space, I'm going to close the tabs here, the panels here. And what I'm going to do is I want to connect this table view, right? So extend the scene or view hierarchy, and then open it up until you find table view. And then you want to drag this table view, click on it, hold Control, and drag it into your class. So drag it right below. And while holding Control, let go. And then you want to type in weather table view. So this is the name of our reference to our table view. Okay? Right. So now there's one thing we want to do. So we can close this now. We don't need this anymore. So you can close it there. And one thing you want to do now is we want to fill it up. And filling it up is kind of a complicated process. It's like a process that you might have to memorize, but it'll make sense over time the more you do it. So we have to introduce this concept called constraints and gains. It's also like another word you might be familiar with is called inheritance. So table view, for the table view class, Apple has wrote some amazing code to fill up these table views and allow you to change them and access your table views. And the way what we want to do is we want to access those files that Apple made. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to extend two protocols called, one is called the UI table view delegate, and one is called the UI table view data source. So let's extend them, right? And the way we extend them is we have this one extension. So if you guys are familiar with Java, the way this looks in Java is, so you have like public class, like, for example, you can have like, I don't know, I just can think of BMW, right? BMW extends car, right? So what this line is doing, it's basically saying, so they'll give me an error because this is Java code, but what this is saying, like BMW inherits all the properties of car. So like if we ever write a car class and we want to write a BMW class, which is a car, we want to inherit all that code so we don't have to rewrite it. And that's the same process we're doing here, but instead of using extends, we use the colon. And actually in Java, it would be implements because what we're inheriting this time are called protocols. And what protocols are, they're classes with methods that are not implemented. So let that sink in. They're classes with methods that have not been implemented. So basically, they're basically this like blueprint. So you have this blueprint and you have to fill in the methods yourself. If you guys have heard of the abstract keyword, they have methods that are not implemented are called abstract methods. So what we're going to do here is we're going to implement table view, UI table view delegate. So it autofills. So we can click that, and then UI table view data source. Okay. And now you should get an error, and that's totally okay. So what this error says, type weather view controller, so that's our class, does not conform to the protocol UI table view data source, UI table view data source, and it asks you, do you want to add the protocol stubs? So like I said, UI table view data source has these methods that have to be implemented, right? In order for it to like do its functionality, right? Which is like store data and like allow us to access data. So you press OK, and then you want to take these methods and you want to drag them right below. Okay, and then maybe like you're not too familiar with like maybe you didn't understand what I said about this, about UI table view data source, UI table view delegate. You can hold Option and click these, and it'll give you like a short documentation on what they are. So basically a summary of this is the methods adopted by the object you use to manage data and provide cells with a table view. So basically it manages the data that we're providing to the cells. That's what the class does. And we're just inheriting it. So, and we're filling in these methods so we can use, so it can do its thing in the back, right? And then if you're confused about this, it's basically methods for managing selections, configuring section headers and footers, deleting and reordering cells, and performing other actions in a table view. So basically this class allows you to delete and reorder cells. So like sometimes you want to delete contacts. This is the class that takes care of that, right? And it has its own respective methods that are not mandatory to implement, but if you want to like add that functionality to delete something, it has a method that you would just import and you would just fill it out and it'll do its thing. So now we want to look at these two methods and what are these two methods asking for? So for, is there a question? Okay. Okay, for the data source to really like manage your data, you have to provide two things towards it. You want to provide it with data, and that's what we're doing here. We're providing it with data, and we want to tell the data source how many rows are in our table. So here, what we're going to do is we want to return an int, and that's what this arrow int says. You got to return an int. So you got to return the number of rows in this table view. So it doesn't say table view, it says section. And the reason it says section is a lot of times table views are broken up into sections. Like if you want to look at your settings page on your iPhone, like you'll see like there are black bars between a lot of the rows, and those are sections. So Apple has divided them into sections because it wants to treat those table views a little differently. So every section is treated a little differently, and every section has rows, right? It's kind of like you have sections, and then you have rows in those sections, right? So so right now what we want to do is we want to return, we only have one section, and we have, this is the amount of data that we have. So what we want to return is, we could return 7 because we know there are 7 days, but we never want to use a constant with anything. Constants are bad. So what we'll do is we'll return the length of the array, which is days.count. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to look at this cell for row at. So this is a bit of like a head scratcher. So it's asking us to return a UI table view cell. And like, you might not know like, how do I like create one? Like an int is pretty easy to create, just return 7, that's a constant number. But like here, that's like, what do I do? So the first thing, I'll show you how you do it. The first thing you want to do is you want to create a variable called letCell, and you want to set it equal to UI table view cell. And this, if you guys are familiar with object-oriented programming, all I'm doing here is I'm creating a cell object, okay? So the next thing you want to do is, this is where we're customizing the cell. We're putting the data into the cell, and then we're sending it to the table view data source, and it will arrange it in the table view, right? So the next thing we want to do is we want to put some information in the cell, the day of the week, right? So we can do cell dot, it has a property called text label. And if you guys were here last time, you know, we can't just set a string to a text label. Text label has another property called text, which is of type string. Let's see. See, this can tell us what type of, by holding option and clicking on a property, you can see like what type of type it is. And then you can set it to days. And then you want to pick a number here, right? You want to define what index are we interested in. And that's already taken care of you by Apple. So Apple gives you this property called index path. So it's basically giving you the index path of like where this table view is supposed to be, right? It tells you the row. So it's going to give you this thing called index path, and then index path should probably have section and row. Yeah, so it has section and it has row. So you want to specify, put this, so it's in, so index path is where this, what row it's supposed to be, or like the path of this cell. And then you want the specific row, right? And then that's how we're specifying like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And then the next thing we want to do, so it's asking me to return the cell, and we can just simply return it, right? And this should fill our table up. So maybe let's try it. We'll see what happens. It might not fill up our table. Let's see. A lot of app development is testing, so let's see if it works. Okay. Hopefully it didn't work for you guys as well, because we forgot to do one major thing. And the thing is, whenever we like extend, so like, I think the way to explain this is we extended these two we extended these two classes, right? And now, actually, I'll backtrack a little bit. We have this table view, right? And this table view needs a UI table view delegate and a UI table view data source. And we have to specify that in some way. And what we can do is we can write weather table view dot weather table view dot UI table view delegate, I believe. Wait, give me a second. Okay, sorry. Yeah, you have weather table view, and then you have weather table view dot delegate, and you can write self, and you can write weather table view dot data source, and you can write self, right? And now I'll explain like why you can do that, right? So basically, it's saying the delegate of this table view will be this view controller class, so will the data source. And the reason we can do that is by extending UI table view delegate and UI table view data source, we're basically saying like this weather view controller is a UI table view delegate and is a UI table view data source. It's like, suppose when we're like writing, I wrote that before, public class BMW extends car. Like if you extend a property, if you're inheriting something, you are also that class that you are inheriting. So a BMW is a car. A weather table view is a UI table view delegate. A weather table view is a UI table view data source. A weather table view is a UI table view control. It's a UI view controller. And that's why we can specify self here. Self is referring to the class. It's actually referring to the instance of the class. So I don't know if you guys know what instances are, but it's basically an instance of a class of the UI view controller is created when you open your app. So that's the instance, right? You can't set it equal to self if the app is not live. Otherwise, it's going to give you an error, right? The reason it gives you an error, if you guys are familiar with object-oriented programming, like you need an instance. Otherwise, you'll end up with like a null pointer exception. Okay, if that makes sense. Yeah, so now if you run it now, it should fill up. Right. We have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Okay, now we've filled up the basic view controller. Okay, so now we're going to take a quick 5-minute break like we did last time. And we can, yeah, I can go over, yeah, I can answer any questions right now too. So Devin asks, can you go over the line cell.text label.text is equal to days index path.row? Right, I think I was a bit unclear about that. So basically a cell has a property called text label, and that's how we're generating, like we're able to write this text. Like automatically, a UI table view cell, like under its properties, if you can think about it, maybe like let's dive into the documentation a little bit. Okay, so this is the documentation. So UI table view cell. Oh, it has some pictures here too. So maybe let's control F it. You can find text label, right? Deprecate. Oh, I think they they no longer support them, or they're not adding to it, but you can still use it. So basically every cell has a text label, and basically this is just an automatic property of a cell, right? And you can access it. And then every text label, if we dive into the documentation again, we'll see every text label has a text. But the reason we can't set like something like this, right? This is of type string, while this is of type text label, right? or yeah, it's type UI text label. So that's why we have to make sure we have to specify this dot text property, because a text label is not a string. And then if you're confused about the index path.row, how does this work? Like, why are we not using like a for loop, right? So basically, this method is called on a loop, right? It's basically for cell for row at. So first here we specify the number of rows, right? We're telling this like, maybe you can think about it in terms of like a Java program. So for int I is equal to 0, and then I is less than to the row count, right? And where are we specifying row count? We're specifying the row count up here. So it hits this method first, okay? And now we have the row count, and then we increment our index. So then now after we specify the row count, it's going to just loop through the row count and do whatever we want here to style the row. So we'll do cell for index path. So here they have this index path. Instead of I, they have index path, right? And index path, the reason they have index path and not just I, or like they're not making us do it, is because like they want to do it for us. They don't want us to go through like every single cell and section. Like sometimes it can be like a 2D array. Sometimes it can be just an array, a single array like this. But they're basically giving you the index, right? And then for that index, you can either say like, do you want to like access a section, or do you want to access a specific row? I believe you can also do like section. And then if you want to do something to the section, you can like edit the whole section as a whole, right? So like it'll go row by row, and then like so you can also like backtrack a little bit. You can look at the section, right? This index path is just a really powerful like indexer that gives you like information on what row we're at. So you can kind of imagine it like it's like a pointer. It's pointing at this row. It's pointing at this. And then it can backtrack a little bit. It can look at the whole section if it wanted to. It can just look at that row. You have to specify that yourself. It's still not printing the days of the week for me. Okay. Digi says it's not printing the days of the week. Make sure you say whether table view.delegate. This might be the reason why it's not working for you. Another reason might be like when we went back here, we went to the table view and we changed the name. We went to the attributes inspector. Wait. Oh, wait, sorry. We went to this one, weather view controller, and then we looked at the identity inspector and we changed the name here. So maybe make sure that's weather view controller. And if you have any errors, we'll be posting this on GitHub right after. So maybe you can compare your code with my project. Okay. Okay, now we worked on creating our table view. So now let's put info. Let's make our request to the internet and get our info. Okay. And yeah, let's see if we can do that. I think we have an hour left. I think definitely we could do it. Right. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is just make that connection to the internet. Right. So I'm going to write something called fetch JSON. Right. And then I'm going to define this method. So this is a method. Right, I'm making a method call. So func fetch JSON, right? For right now, it's not going to return anything. We'll return something later on. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to connect to the API and get our information. And we'll try to get our information in this format. So we'll try to print whatever necessary information that we need. Okay, so let me just look at my notes. Okay, so the first question to really ask yourself when you're trying to access an API is like, where do you want to go? Like, what's your URL? So the first thing I want to do is I want to define a string, right? And our string is going to be our URL address. okay? And I have the URL. So let's go to Postman. It's actually right there. Where is Postman? So this is our URL. And this is the weather in New York City. We're not doing a specific location today, but if you want, you guys can expand on this app and match a specific location's weather, right? It's a little bit more complicated, and the whole point of this workshop is to create a base, not the entire product. Okay, so I will post this URL here, and I will also post it in the chat. So if you don't have the URL, if you weren't with us yesterday, it's in the chat. So just make a variable and copy and paste it. No semicolon. I don't know why I added that. So the next thing you want to do, like this is where you're going, right? What is my address? So the next thing you're interested in is you want to make this a URL object. So we're going to call this let URL equal URL, capital letters. You'll be creating a URL object using the string. And you can do this pretty easily by just specifying your string, and our string is str. And then the thing after that is sometimes you can just stop here, but there's another level you can go to. Sometimes there's a URL request. And the difference between a URL and a URL request is URL request can allow you to put like some authentication like keys that this API doesn't require, but some do. There's some authentication keys that you would have to put in like in Postman. Let's go back to Postman. Sometimes you have to put some stuff in the headers, right? And it's not directly in the URL. The URL object doesn't allow you to do that. It only allows you to like convert this string into a URL, an actual URL. But a URL request allows you to put like some verification on top of that that is not included in the string, right? Some APIs like the Oxford Dictionary, I believe, they have this extra API key that you have to only put on after you make a URL request object. So let's write your let request equal to URL request, and then you type in URL, and then you would type in the URL. So it might look a little confusing, but this URL, right? This URL, I mean, this is the parameter name. This is also the parameter name. This is referring to the object, right? These are referring to the object. So in Swift, it's parameter name colon your parameter value, okay? So now it's giving me an error. Value of optional URL must be unwrapped. So this URL is actually an optional value. If you guys weren't here last time, you probably don't know what an optional value is. The optional value is basically a value that can be null or it cannot be null. So in Swift, we don't allow normal objects, so literal objects, to be null. Like in Java, the default value of an object is null. In Swift, the default object has to have a value unless it's not an optional. So what an optional looks like, let's see, maybe like, see here. Yeah, so like this is you'll see a question mark. Anytime you're viewing an optional object, there'll be a question mark. So what we can do to make this a non-optional object is we can write this thing called guard let else return. So basically it's a lot of times in Java we write like if object is equal to null, just don't continue, right? And this is like a fancy way to do that, right? Yeah, there's nothing like, it's just a fancy way. So guard let, so if you can create this object and this object is not nil, continue, otherwise return if you do return nil. So like suppose you're making a URL object and this URL actually doesn't exist, so it doesn't connect to an actual object, an actual website, then it'll return. But if it doesn't, if it does connect to an actual object, an actual website, it'll continue. Okay. Now maybe let's explore the benefits of requests a little bit. So request has like different properties like request dot. So it has like these different policies, a lot of attributes that maybe the URL didn't have. Like let's look at them. So URL is pretty limited with like properties, but request is just a lot more functionality, right? We have a lot more stuff here. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create something called a URL session. So we want to establish like that connection between our app and the internet. So we call that a let session equal URL session dot shared. And I'm not super familiar with like the definition of like all this, but if you're ever confused, like you need a reminder. So this creates a shared singleton session object. So maybe like that doesn't make a lot of sense. We can maybe read the discussion. For basic requests, the URL session class provides a shared singleton session object that gives you a reasonable default behavior for creating tasks. Use a shared session to fetch the contents of a URL to memory with just a few lines of code. So basically, it allows us to fetch whatever the response allows us to do. Okay, and now what we want to do with the session is create a data task. So we want a task. We have a task to return data. And then there's a bunch of options here. So don't memorize this. Like type in data and then look at the options that you have. And oftentimes you'll be caught between with URL and with URL request. I'm looking right here with the parameters. So we have a request now, and this is what we want. So we want completion handler, data, URL response, error, returns void, right? So double click on that. And then we can input our request right there. It's asking for a request. You put a request there. And then here you can put in, you want to double click this. And this opens up something called a closure. And what a closure is a function inside a function, right? So basically it's a function with no like method header. It just has the parameters and you can just run the function inside here. Pretty neat. So we'll just give names for all of these parameters. So data, response, and error, right? So now it's pretty straightforward what we want to do. Like let's maybe like simplify this. What we want to do is if we receive data, we want to continue and maybe like print out that data for now. We'll do other things with it. But if we don't receive any data, we want to print the error message. And if you successfully are able to get the data, this error value will be nil. Okay, so we just want to do if we get data, so if data is not nil, and error is equal to nil, you want to do something. Else, you want to print an error. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is, since we have data, maybe let's print the data, okay? And see what it gets us. All right, so now just for like, so this code will run, and I forgot to explain what view.did.load is. So view.did.load is basically your main method in Java. So like it's the first method that will run and it'll start everything, right? So if you ever want to write code, it has to start in the view.did.load and then you want to expand to whatever method that you have, right? So let's run this and see what happens. Hopefully it should. Okay. We should have got some data. So the data should have showed up down here. So nothing printed. So I think there was a small error with what we did. So maybe let's think it over. So the reason this didn't run is it called the request, but we never so what happens here is when you make a call to the internet, it doesn't want to stop the entire app. It calls the internet and wants to resume everything it's doing, right? Like when you're calling info to Instagram or like whatever app you're using, they don't like just call the data and they just don't make you wait there, right? They do other stuff in the background. Like they can do things while they're waiting for the data. And that's what we want to do here, right? We want to hold, we want to resume everything, right? So if this is taking some time, resume and it will work. So now run it again, let's see what happens. And awesome, we got some error here, but the main thing is I want to highlight, we got this optional bytes. So over the internet, data is sent through bytes, and that's what we got. We got all the data that we wanted. But now I want to display this information like we have in Postman. And the way we want to do that requires a little bit of more effort, right? The first thing we want to do is we want to create things called structs. So basically, we kind of want to have like a way we can map and store this information inside our app, and that requires like something like we want to store it in variables and objects so we can access it, right? We can't access specific bytes, right? So we have to put it in a way where we can access. And the way we're going to do that is we're kind of mimic this diagram in our app. And you'll see like exactly how we're going to do it. But it's important to take note of exactly how this looks because that's how we're going to mimic it, okay? So the first thing you want to do is open up this panel and you want to create a new file. So you can hold this. I know last time we did Command N. You can also make a new file down here, press plus, file, and open a Swift file, okay? New file. So this is for data, right? It's not Cocoa Touch because Cocoa Touch is for cells, things you can touch. View controllers, this is a data file, okay? So what we're gonna do, we'll just call it weather, right? It'll add the dot Swift by itself. Okay. Okay, now we have this like blank screen. So what import foundation does, it just imports Swift, right? So what we want to do is we want to call something called create something called struct. It's kind of like an object, but not the same. I'm not gonna explain the difference because it's they're very similar, but there's some pretty significant differences. So what we want to do is we want to kind of copy this diagram, right? But the thing, what we're allowed to do is we're allowed to pick specifically what we want, right? And let's maybe look at it and see like what we want. So we want the daily weather. So we want this array. We want to store that array. Is there anything else that's very important here? No, I don't think there's anything else here that we need. Oh, there's one thing that we might need that I forgot to mention. All right. So one thing here, I'll add it here and I'll send you guys a new link, right? And you can like copy it yourself. Is you want to include units and something called units. And you want to make sure it's an imperial. I don't know if you noticed, right now it's returning information in Kelvin. And we can look at our API that we were looking at yesterday. Right here. So this is the API that we're using, and this is the specific documentation that we're looking at. And here, like they tell you a bunch of parameters that you must include. Some are optional. Units is something that's optional, and you have the option of standard, metric, imperial. And imperial is if you want to look more for temperature in Fahrenheit, wind speed, miles an hour. You want to use imperial, right? And it just goes wherever, I believe. So we'll just test it. I'll test it here to see if it works. And like so, it converted everything. And I'll put this inside the URL, inside the chat. So API URL goes up there. And then I'll copy this and put it in my app. So I'll go back to my app, go to weather view controller, change this to that. Okay, and now you want to go to weather, and now let's construct this object exactly how it looks, right? So maybe let's copy this a little bit. Maybe that'll be easier for you guys to view. Usually I would have 2 monitors and like I'd be able to easily see it, but since you guys can only see one, it's a little more difficult. Okay, so let's just copy this here and comment it, command / comments everything. And let's observe what we want here. So we want this daily temperature. And so this first like object, I'll just call it a weather object. This name that I choose up here doesn't matter, but the parameters have to be the same. So for example, daily has to be exactly like that, right? And then now the type I can specify, right? But you can see it's an array, right? What type, like, and this is another JSON object. So for every JSON object, there has to be a struct. So I'll call this a daily, right? If you remember from a couple minutes ago, this is how we specify an array of something, right? And it's giving us an error, cannot find daily in scope because we haven't wrote daily, but I don't think we need anything else here. I'm just trying to verify. Yeah, I don't think we need anything else. So now it's good. Some people are pretty expert and they just like, they'll continue writing their, they'll define all their structs that they need in this one file. But I feel like for beginners, it's better to like make separate files for every struct. Because it just helps a little bit. So we'll do the same process. It also helps you get familiarized with how to make new files. So I'm just going to go back to using the shortcut to make files. So click on the file folder that you want to create your file in. Hold Command N, Swift file. Next, I'll call this file daily. You'll create daily.swift. And now this gets a bit more interesting. So struct daily. So now daily has a bunch of attributes that I am interested in. So I want DT, I believe this is that time, daytime. The daytime, so like Sunday time. So it'll be like the midnight time, I don't know. Should it be like the time before? So basically these numbers, I haven't explained them. So these numbers are like the number of seconds since 1970. And that's how a common way people send time. I don't know why it's 1970, but we'll have to convert this later. And I have code that we'll just copy to just convert it. Okay, so this is like, we want the DT, we want the temp, okay? And remember, this is, maybe let's copy this part and put it here. These are just comments, so they won't affect the code. So we want var, DT, and this will be of type int, right? So we have different types of int. This one will so this will just like automatically decide which int is right for you. So that's probably the best way to go. And then you want to create var temp of type temp like that. And then same process again. We want to make our new file. And then struct temp. And then I don't know if you remember, but the things that we want will be probably var min, var max, and these are the values that we need. Okay. And I believe that's all we need. Those are the only things I'm kind of interested in right now. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so if you hold like you shouldn't get an error anymore because you defined temp there. You defined daily over here. You can delete these comments. They're just like take up space, and then you can hold Command B to build your product, your app, and that just like saves everything, refreshes everything. So now we have this schema kind of to like store the data in, right? So now you want to go back to um, this our first view controller. So basically, we're going to decode this JSON and we're going to store it in these structs. So now we can access them. So what we're going to do here is, let's see, here, right? So this is we're going to do something, right? We're going to decode this data. So what you want to do is you want to do let decoder equal JSON decoder. So they have two options: encoder, decoder, serialization. Encoder is when you want to send information, encode it and send it. Decoder is when you're receiving it and you want to break it down. So like an object that decodes instances of data type from JSON. So it just decodes the bytes that we were receiving. Okay, and once again, we're creating an object. We just never want to do this, right? That doesn't do anything. That calls the class. We want the object. So the next thing we want to do is we can decode decoder dot decode, and then we have some protocol. So this decodable protocol. So now this raises a question. What is this decoder protocol, right? So basically it's saying this has to be of type decoder protocol. And so basically we have to make sure our structs can be decoded by a JSON object. So we have to extend this codable protocol. And like you'll see that it's a T there, right? So this T is a combination of two protocols, decodable and encodable. So it's just very safe to, right now we're just decoding information. We're not encoding information and sending it. We're just decoding information. But it's good to just have both, right? If someone's offering you two options for free, just take both. So you want to make sure all of them are codable. When something's codable, it's encodable and decodable. So now this is all of these structs now are extend or they implement the decodable protocol. And now we can put the struct here. It's a type that implements the decodable protocol. So just put it in here. It's called weather. It's a weather object. And then from which data? From this data. So make sure it's data. Okay, I'm gonna close some panels here so we can look at it. All right, so now it's giving us a bunch of errors. So it's saying value of type optional. So data is of type optional. But remember, what optional is, it can hold nil and it cannot hold nil. And if we ever try to use a nil value in our app, that's when our app crashes. That's when app crash, like apps in general, that's when they crash. But we've already checked that data is not nil. So now we can just use an exclamation point. Exclamation point just means I've already checked it. I know this is not nil. Let's use it. Now we have a couple more errors. So we have something, it's saying like this throws an error. So I don't know if you guys noticed, right? Decoder.decode throws an error. And anytime in any program, Java, Swift, if you decode an error, you have to surround, if you throw an error, you have to surround it around a try catch, right? And Swift is a little different. We, instead of try, we use the word do. So do, and then we have catch, right? So do is, do is like try and do this. So we'll try and do this. But if this throws an error, if this doesn't run successfully, just do something else. And for our other action, we'll just say unsuccessful. We were unable to decode. Okay, and now we're still getting more errors. So what we want to do now is, when you have a do, I don't know why they have to do it this way, but like you have to write do and catch, and then you also have to write try here. So I'm not really sure the intuition behind this, but that's how it goes. So another thing we want to do is we want to save this object. And I'll just call it let.json is equal to this object. And I think now we should be a little, oh, we still have some errors. So expected name, member, so it's saying, I think we have to have the dot self. Sometimes they make enclosures, a lot of times they'll make us write dot self or self dot. Right, that should fix our issue, I believe. Oh, no, I think we have to write weather dot self. Right, maybe this will fix it. Okay, so now we have a couple of errors. These are not errors. The yellow lines are just like optional things you can change. But yeah, this is fine. So this is basically saying we've never used it. So what we want to do now is we want to kind of send this information back. So we received the information, but we want to send it back. And the way we do that is with something called a closure that we've been using down there. But we can also create a closure up here that basically allows us to like fill the table. Like after this, like fill the table. And the way we're going to do that is with Swift is a language that has functional programming. And what functional programming does, it allows you to put methods, it allows you to put methods as parameters. So like I said, this is how you define a parameter name. And what we're going to do is we're going to define a method. So we're going to write a method that takes in weather and returns, itself, right? It returns whatever we send back, right? And it's going to do some things over here. So, and also we have to make sure this is escaping. I'm not really too familiar with this word escaping. It's basically, it has something to do with like prolonging information in the heap after it like passes it. Like I've heard the definition a couple times. Like maybe we can like explore it together right now, or maybe like they don't have anything to like. Yeah, you can't like really look into it, but like there's like tons of videos on at escaping, and basically it's it allows you to like without code completing, without this completely completing, it allows you to just like return out. So like basically without it fully going through all of this, you can return out, right? And that's what escaping does. And so we have an error up here. And basically we call this fetch JSON method, but we're not like, we don't define this method that's supposed to, change the, it's not, we don't define our closure, right? So we don't define this method. So this method, this is just, remember, like this is a weird syntax. It's okay if you don't fully grasp what's going on here. But like basically, like normally we would have the name of the method, the method name there, and then we would have our parameter. But since we don't like want to like create a method, a whole new method for this, we kind of can like write it inside as a parameter. And I'm not really too sure about the semantics of it, like why it's the case, but it allows us to write code really quickly and allows us to like do some real quick computations, right? So we can call this method, and then after this method is done, we can do some other things and on different threads as well. So that's the benefit of that. So what we want to do here is maybe we'll just delete this call here and call it again, fetch JSON, and now we'll have this completion handler. And then now, as you've seen a couple times tonight, like I've been like double clicking here, and that creates the closure, right? And basically this is just a function. So like, hopefully you understand. So this is a function with a parameter weather. So the weather that we'll be sending back will be sending to this, okay? So this is the same weather, okay? And we just want to do something after receiving the data, right? So what we're going to do is we have to first send back the weather. And the way we send back the weather is, like I said, this parameter is a function. So what we can do is this is a bit of a brain twister, but like we can use this parameter and call a function on it. And we're going to be sending back the JSON. So this is the parameter. This is the parameter. This is the parameter of the parameter. And then we're on this completion, on the completion of getting the data, we run this code. So it's a little weird. So basically, normally you would have this, and then you would have like stuff here. But the way we're doing it is we have this parameter, which is a function, and this is the parameter of our function, which is a parameter, is gonna we're gonna write its implementation over here. Hopefully that makes sense. You'll get used to it. Functional programming is new, it's complicated, but you'll get used to it. So here we want to define the specific name of our parameter. And what we want to do is we kind of want to save it as a object here. So we'll call let weather data of type weather. And we'll make this an optional, right? It's because we're not going to directly, we're not going to declare it initially because we have to make the call. So it's something that has to wait. And I made a mistake here. So it's not going to be a let, it's going to be a var. The reason it's var, not let, lets cannot be changed. Lets are constant throughout. So this is bound to be changed because we're going to call it and we're going to receive info, right? So what we want to do is simply set weather data equal to weather, okay? And there's one more thing you want to do is write this line of code called dispatch async or main. Wait, I'm not too sure. It's like, give me a second. I get the order of these messed up. It's like, yeah, oh, there we go. I didn't write it right. It's dispatch queue, right? Dispatch queue dot main, yeah, dot async. So what this does, it schedules a block asynchronously for execution optionally associated with the dispatch group. So basically, it'll schedule a block of code, which we'll be writing, and it's basically going to execute this code when it finds time, right? So the synchronous code, if you guys don't know what synchronous code is basically procedural, like line by line code. Asynchronous is like multi-threaded code, right? So basically, since we're referring to it inside a like closure, this is also another closure. You want to do self dot, right? And this refers to the instances weather data. Okay, so now what we want to do, oh, I actually wanted to like print this data. So we can also do one more thing. We can print the JSON data here to show that we've successfully decoded the data. And then we want to run our app, and then we'll see if everything compiles. If there's any issues, we can go and fix them. Okay, so we were unable to decode. Let's see why. So there was an issue that came up. So we had the JSON decoder. We let JSON. Maybe it was an issue with the data? No, we successfully hit the API. But the thing that I think we want to look at is maybe our structs. We were not totally. I think maybe one of our structs were messed up. We can look at them. Struct temp, DT temp, codable, right? Or maybe let's look at Postman, or I'll look at Postman and see if these match. So we have daily, DT, temp. Okay. Oh, okay. Right. So what I did here, I made a mistake. So these are the daily, the temperatures are doubles, and they're not ints. So you gotta be very careful with like the types. The types have to match. The name here has to match. The type has to match exactly. Okay. So now, good thing we didn't just go and start implementing our table view. So now, if you run it now, hopefully it's gonna give you the right output. Oh, still an error. Okay, let's see. We have the doubles. That's fixed. The DT, that's all right. Temperature, good. Good. Maybe there's an error here. Let's see. .json, try decode, weather.self from data. Maybe let's check if this is running. So, all right, we can take a 5-minute break. I'll just try to like look over what's working. You guys can ask any questions if you're stuck. So let me know. I'm not really sure what's. Gotta look at this. See what's not working. So we're getting an error right here. So we're trying to decode this data. So maybe let me look at my notes. So how's it going, everyone? Is everyone on the same page?
Can you please like briefly explain what you just did?
Which part?
The when you say decoder.decode.
So what decoder.decode is doing, you know how we're getting information in bytes? It's basically like converting those bytes and saving them as these structs. Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. JSON decoder .json try decoder .decode completion. Okay, maybe let's try that. Unable to decode still. Yeah, I think there's an issue with how I wrote this. Bar daily DT. Maybe I forgot to include something. So okay, so okay. So what I did here is I just made a small error. Yeah, so usually if you're not able to decode, you make an error with like how you're parsing your information. And I think I just mislooked it. So the reason we use a square brackets for daily is because there's square brackets over here. But temp is just an object, right? So what we can do is we can just break it down like that. And then we can run it again. I feel it's good to make mistakes live so you guys can see what's like the process of debugging. So now hopefully it'll work. Yeah, so now we got our information. It looks very like confusing, but like RUMAD weather workshop temp, boom. So you got the min and the max and the time. And yeah, I know I was a little short with the question, but like, yeah, if you guys want to go over JSON decoder again, so what JSON decoder is doing is getting this data, right? So this data is originally in bytes, but it represents JSON, right? And then you're doing this do catch. So the reason we want to do a do catch is like if our schema here is incorrect, we want to just like return out, because if you try to write decoder.decode weather.self from data, it's going to give you an error if it doesn't match, and it's going to give you a nil. So then we would print we were unable to decode like we got down there, but that's why it wasn't working initially, because our schema was messed up, or the way we were parsing the information, our structs were messed up. And that's why it's important to have this do catch in this try. And we want to convert it, like before we were just getting optional bytes, right? So now we print both optional bytes, but this bytes information represents this information. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, cool. So now we want to fill up our table view. And the way we do that is we want to go back to our table view methods, and instead of days.count, we want to look at weather data, right? So instead of weather data, we want to look at how many days, right? And the way we can figure out how many days there are, we can go to like weather, and then there's this daily array, and we just want the number of arrays, the count of this daily array. And the way we can do that is we can reference our weather data object up here. And instead of days.count, we do weather data dot daily. And then remember, daily is a array, right? So you can just do dot count. And yeah, so basically this is an optional, right? And another way, a way you can provide a default value if you get nil for this, if this returns nil, another way you can provide a default value is with 2 question marks, that's 0. So basically, if you're unable to parse this value, if it returns nil, just go with 0. Okay, and then the next thing you want to do is we want to change the text a little bit. So for now, we're just gonna maybe write something fairly quickly. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a string. And for the string, we're gonna say the time question mark. And a way you can like interlope strings in Swift is like this. So this can provide a variable. So this will be our time. And then we can provide a comma. High will be our, or like, yeah, like that. That can be our high temp. And then we can have a low temp. Okay. So now I just use these times. I believe time is not valid. So maybe let's use day, because I think time is like something in Swift. So now we have to define these variables. And we can do that by just doing let day is equal to, so weather data dot daily. And since daily is an array, we have to specify which index, which is not too difficult. We will just use index path.row. So this will go from 0 to the number of count that we provide up here. And then we want to do time, okay? And then let high temp is equal to weather data daily index path dot row dot temp dot max. And I'm just going to copy this line again, and that will be our low temp. And then this will be min down here. Okay, hopefully now it defines all of these values. It should. Oh wait, I didn't spell them right. So make sure the spelling is right. Okay, and then you just can do Command B to build it if you want. That just saves everything. Okay, and now what you want to do is before we run it, we want to just add this one line of code up here, which is in our viewDidLoad method. We want to write something down here. So after we set the weather data equal to weather, we want to do weather data, weather table view dot reload data. So basically, once we receive the weather, we want to reload the data. And it's giving us an error because weather table view is a property of the class. So it says just include the self dot. Okay. So you run it. And hopefully it should provide you with some data. Hopefully. It's waiting. Huh. Oh, okay. So what happened here is like probably a 0 was provided and there's no data. So that's okay. So, oh, okay. You know what was not done? I think we didn't we didn't set the string equal to the text. So I think that will fix everything. Yeah, we forgot to do that. So maybe this will do it, but I feel that won't do the trick either. Yeah, it didn't work. So I think one thing maybe let's look at is this count, right? So let's see. So it's returning a 0 because it's saying this weather object is nil. So maybe let's go up here, reload weather data. That should do the trick. Not sure. Let's see. Let's see. Just not sure why that's not working. Let's maybe try something that we know would work. Let's try 5 instead of providing 0. Let's do 5, and then we can like see how this plays out. Okay, so the reason we're getting nil, 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 so that's the issue. So what's happening here is it's not parsing the values properly. So why is this happening? So this is happening because these values are not being parsed properly. So I think weather data, let's see if it's being parsed. Okay, good. So I just realized what I did. So before I was testing this and I commented this line out. So the reason this is providing nil is because no data was ever sent back. And that's the reason we need the completion handler. That's what the completion handler does. It sends info back to the method and it executes this. However, if this method is never invoked, if we never do completion JSON, then this code will not run. See? there's so many good things you can learn when you like make an error. Like I wouldn't have explained that at all. So yeah, so we can try it out. Okay, so now it kind of looks like this. Looks kind of weird. We have optional, optional, optional. So we want to first get rid of these optional values, right? The way we can do that is we can just say, we can maybe put we can like put an exclamation point here, right? Though I do my notes. I don't think it's best practice to do that, but okay, so what you can do instead, I think that's not a good idea. Putting exclamation point, that's bound to break your app. So what I did in my notes, I just set everything equal to 0. Okay. Okay. And that will get rid of the optional part because now it'll be a constant value. So hopefully, let's run it again. Let's check it out. Lots of testing. All right, sweet. So now we have the time, the high temp, the low temp. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is convert this time, right? It looks weird. So what we do is I actually don't want to like show you guys how to do that. It's actually like a very annoying process. I just found something in Stack Overflow one day, and it was very useful to me. So I'll put the code on here first. So basically, this is just a time converter that basically you put in a time as an int, which is our date, our time, and then we basically like convert it by like creating the state object, time style, and this and that. And then we have to specify like what type of format do we want this data in. I know like D is like the day of the year or something. M is day in the month. So like EEE will get us the day of the week. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this code into, if it's possible, I'll just copy and paste this into the chat, and you guys can just copy and paste it there. So this is the code to convert time to day of the week. So now what I'll do here, instead of, so I'll change this from day to time. And then I'll create a new object called let day is equal to time converter. Enough time, and I'll input time as my parameter. And since this is a static method, in Swift, we have to specify the class. So it will be weather view controller dot class. So that's the class that we're in, right? Weather view controller. Okay. And then you put in time converter, and then it puts the time in. We specify a specific format. So you can like look at the comments here. It sets the time style, sets the date style. It's like relative to the current time, I believe, or something. And then it'll like do some fancy stuff. And then it will convert our time to our day of the week. Yeah, so now we have that, right? And this is basically the app, but I want to just go one step further and maybe customize this so we can look at how we can make a custom cell. So what we do now, so we have our info, right? Our info is exactly how we want it. But now what we want to do is we want to create a new cell. We want to customize how it looks. And the way we do that, we have to go back to the storyboard. And here we can like change the width of the cell, right? So you can go here, click on the cell, change the attributes to 100. So it's a nice width. And now we're gonna just drag a bunch of labels, and maybe like an image view as well. And we'll just drag them on. So that's a label. I also want another label for the, I'll show you how it's supposed to look like, right? So here I want the day of the week, and then here I want the high low temperature. And then I want image view for like the type of weather I'm going to receive, right? Let's make it a little smaller. It doesn't really matter about the height. We'll change that. We can change that programmatically. So the first thing I want to specify is I want to, so this is what constraints do. I know this is a new workshop. We talked about constraints a lot last time, but what constraints do, it organizes the layout of your UI elements such that it looks the same on every device, right? Right now we have an iPhone 11. We want to make sure our UI elements format themselves so it looks good on all devices. So the way you play around with your constraints is down here. These are the constraint setters. So right now I want to set it at the halfway point of the cell. And the way I can do that is I can click on the align button and then set it vertically in the container, right? And now the next thing you want to do is you want to, for every object, you have to set an X, a Y, a width, and a height. So here I have, I've set the Y value, right? So I've set where I want it on the Y axis. So now it's kind of dangling on the X axis. Where do you want to set it there? So I want to set it maybe like, you can click on this square button and you can set it 20 from the left, okay? Right, and that's 20 from the left. Actually, maybe if you want to change your constraints, you can go to the size inspector. You can edit them and maybe change it to, I think I want to change it to 0. Yeah, I think 0 is fine. Okay, now I have these two elements I want to change. This will be the high on the low. I'll set the image view first. So what I'll do, I'll also set this in the middle of the y-axis. Wait, I think the first thing we want to do with the image view is set a height and a width. So we want to make sure the aspect ratio, set aspect ratio. And then you want to go to the size, with the image view selected, you want to go to the size inspector. You want to edit this to a 1:1 ratio, 1:1. And then I want to set the height. You want to set the height to maybe like 50 by 50. That's gonna be fine. Well, the width is 50, but the aspect ratio should be the same. But maybe let's delete this aspect ratio and then set it again. That might do the trick. And then I think now set this equal to 1:1. I just couldn't see. So edit. There's this thing down here. So yeah, that's 1:1. That's fine. And that should be fine. Is that 1:1? That doesn't look 1:1. I think you want to change your width to 50. Yeah, maybe we can just change it up here. That's fine. So the next thing you want to do, you set the y value. Now you want to set the x value. So we can just set this maybe like 20 from the right. Okay, so now this is set well, right? And maybe you can make it a little bigger. Can you do that? Actually, let's not do that. Let's not play around. So the next thing you want to do is play around with this label, and you want to set this label on top of the image view. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to hold Shift and click on the image view. And then we want to go down here and align their centers. I know I'm going a little fast, but this is like some extra stuff. And now the centers are aligned. And now the thing you want to do is, since you've set the x value, you want to set the y value. How are you going to do the y value? Just maybe set this a few points above, right? Right. So that should be fine. And then we'll just call this Monday. We can just call this Monday. This is our just like some sample data, hard-coded data. Let's put 90, and then the low can be 67. I don't know. And then for the image view, you can do you can change this image view to an image here. We can learn how to dynamically do it. We'll do that later, right now. But for now, we'll just set it to like maybe sun max fill. Pretty cool. So now our job is to kind of like create. We want to create we have this big view controller, and now we want to create a smaller view controller, or like a smaller view to handle like these UI elements. The way we're going to do that is we're going to make a new Cocoa Touch file, and we're going to make it of type UI, table view cell, the UI table view cell. Okay. Yeah, and then we'll call this maybe like the daily temp cell. And then just make it with the rest of your files. Let's go through this pretty quickly. So basically, the way we're going to set our cells is we're going to create a method called setCell. And with this method, it will set the day, which will be a string. We'll also set the high temp, which will be of type double. And then the low temp, which will be of type double as well. Also, so then what we want to do is we want properties, right? This is kind of our constructor if you're familiar with like object-oriented programming, right? So what we want to do is we want to create some properties here up here. And the way we're going to do that is the way we did before with the table view, we're just going to create some connections called IB outlets. So we hold Option Shift, click on the table view. You don't really care about how this like screen looks like, right? Screen looks like over here, but we want to get the labels in the image view, right? And we just hold Control, and you might see it's not connecting. Why is it not connecting? And the reason is, like we set a connection between the view controller and the weather view controller, we also have to set a connection between this day temp cell with the table view cell. So there's going to be a property here, and we can just type in day temp cell, and it should autocomplete. Okay, and now you can like fill in these properties. Control, put them up here. Right? So it can be a day label, and then this will be our temp label. And this can be our, I don't know if we have time for an image view, but we'll just put this here. It'll be the icon image view. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is close this. We don't need this anymore. So the next thing we want to do is we want to set day label that text is equal to day, just like a normal constructor. But no, this is not a constructor. It's acting like one, but it's not a constructor. I mean, sorry. So now it's like the temp label dot text is equal to high temp. Oh no, so we have like a thing we wrote in here that we can just kind of steal, which is this, right? We can kind of steal this. And we'll go back to our tab, and boom, let's steal that. Wrap quotes around it. It'll work like magic because we've named everything the same. And then, since we don't have like images loaded in, and otherwise you would have to write a switch statement. And maybe I have the switch statement, so I will write. I'll just copy and paste the code for those who are viewing later. But but let's focus on this. So this is a function to note, And now we just go back to our cell. So we have this function here, and we're just going to call it here. And the way we're going to call it, instead of creating a string here, you're going to do set cell. And then we're going to do like, we had day, we'll send in day. We had high temp, we'll send in high temp. And then we had low temp, and we'll send in low temp. But note, before we do so, we have to set this, instead of, it's not a normal table view cell, it's a weather cell. It's a daily temperature cell, right? And it's kind of weird how you have to do this. So we have to make it a recycler. So now we have to write this extra code called DQ. So maybe let's not write it like that. It's DQ, or maybe like DQ. Oh, okay. It's like weather data dot DQ. Wait, I think I'm forgetting the method. So it's table view dot DQ reusable cell. Yeah, so we're referencing this table view, which is our table view, and DQ reusable cell with identifier, right? And you might be asking, where is this identifier coming from? So we have to specify this in our storyboard. So we specify this identifier in the daily temp cell. So we basically have to put, go to attributes inspector, the reuse identifier, and we'll just put daily temp cell ID, right? And this allows us to basically reuse these cells on command, right? You're just specifying what cell do you want to reuse. And I don't want to get into semantics because we're out of time, but so basically what it's doing is every time you scroll up, it's basically using the rows that are scrolling beyond the screen. It's putting them at the bottom. It's like a cycle. Okay, now we have a bunch of errors, so that's okay. We just want to, we can fix these errors with one small fix. We just call this as weather daily temp cell, right? And put an exclamation point there. It just helps. Okay, so now we have our set cell. So what we're going to do here is do cell.setCell, and that will basically set the elements how we want it to. So maybe let's run it to see how it goes. I know I've been going a bit quickly, but we're about done with the workshop. Let's see. Okay, so there's a small error with, I don't know if you noticed, there's a small error with this it's overriding the text. And we can fix that with one of there's a table view method that we can fix that with. Let's put our table view methods together. So we can just call table view height for row at, specify that, and then you can just return a value. So we'll return 100. Okay, so now what you want to do is just, you can delete that. That's not supposed to be there. And then let's try and run it, see how it goes. I think there's another error with the constraints, but hopefully this fixes it. Yeah, it takes time to run sometimes. Oh, there's like some, oh, okay, so the issue that's coming here, we want to get rid of this because we're setting the text, right? We don't need that extra text anymore. So we can just run it there. Okay, and now it'll work as planned. Yeah, I think the text is going a little over as well. So the way you can fix that is you can go to main storyboard and then click on this text. So there's like a text label. Click on the temp label, set a constraint, make sure it doesn't go over. Put it a 0 constraint, so it's 0 from the right, and this will prevent it from going over. So now if you run it, it'll work perfectly. Right, okay, and now I think there's like a couple of dots here. So instead of the dots, we probably don't want that. So maybe there's a thing we can do here with the constraints to fix that. So let's maybe explore that a little bit. So what we're doing here is, oh, I think I made a mistake somewhere. So whatever I did before. Oh, okay, so I want to get rid of that. And the way I think I'm going to fix that is, maybe let's make it like, it's still going over. So maybe let's change this icon itself. So let's push this a little towards the center. Right. So this has a trailing space. We can fix this trailing space to maybe like 35. Right. There's obviously like a better way to do this. But we're in a rush. We're just trying to get an app done, get a base. And hopefully this displays. Still, it's like going a little over. You can change the text. I think that fixed it a couple days for me. You can make it, maybe resemble it more like high, low, change the text here. High, low. There's like other ways you can auto shrink it. There's so many ways you can really like change the size so you make sure it like fits on screen. See, that fixes it, right? But there are better ways to do it, right? And that's the end of today's workshop. I know there's also like the image view that you can change, and the way you would do that is you could just take some more info from Postman, right? So Postman has like some more info down here. If you go to so every day also they provide an icon ID. So this icon ID under weather. So if you like change your schema a little bit and you include this weather object and you parse this icon object, you'll see that it maps to some icons that they have here. I don't know if I have icons here. So how to get icons, right? So they have some icons here that those IDs map to, and you would just download these, like I think they have a download URL download or something. And you would download these, and then you can like explore how to play with image assets. So you actually put them in your assets. These are where like images go, and then you can like refer to those images using some code, right? And that's pretty much it for the workshop. I know Eric is only here, but thank you for coming and staying the whole time. Hopefully you learned a whole lot about what it's like to make a pretty significant app. This is a pretty complicated app, so if you're able to follow along, you should be really proud of yourself. And we'll be putting this on YouTube and in a couple of days, so hopefully you can see it there. And if there are any errors or any fixes, I'll probably leave them in the description below. And yeah, that's all for the workshop. I'll be staying for a couple minutes to answer some questions. Yeah, yeah, so I'll end it right here. Right. I'll stop recording.